Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. Before we begin, we have a very important announcement. As part of Target Prelims 2023, today we shall have the third session for Environment and Ecology live on our YouTube channel at 7:30 p.m. Do attend the session without fail. It will help you revise all the important current affairs topics from Environment and Ecology for the upcoming prelims. Also take a look at the detailed schedule of Target Prelims 2023. These sessions will go on till 15th May. So do attend all these sessions so that you're thoroughly prepared for the upcoming prelims. So with this, let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at the topics we are going to cover today. I have chosen three important articles from page number 6, 7, 8. These are editorials and columns that require a detailed discussion and analysis. We have some very interesting and very different topics lined up for today. Once we complete this discussion, we shall take a look at the smaller articles in today's newspaper, which are more relevant for the prelims. So just stay with me for the next 1 hour. I promise to cover all these topics as comprehensively as possible so that you don't have to go back and waste your time in reading the newspaper again. All you have to do in return is to support us by pressing the like button, share your comments, and do subscribe to our channel. And also don't forget, as soon as the session ends, we have a quiz on our Telegram channel on these topics. So directly head to our Telegram channel after the session so you can revise these topics again. Now let's start with the first topic for today. We shall be taking up this important column from page number 8 from the explained section, from the text and context page, which deals with the AI Act or the Artificial Intelligence Act, which has been proposed by the European Union. Recently, the European Parliament, which is one of the primary organs of the European Union, it's also a legislative body of the European Union, it has proposed a law. It has brought out a draft AI Act to regulate artificial intelligence. This acquires a lot of significance because around the world there have been a lot of concerns about the rising applications of artificial intelligence. So let's understand this in complete detail. Let's look at the provisions of this law. Let's see what the European Union is trying to do. But before that, let's understand the role of AI in today's industrial and technological development. Let's understand the risks associated with AI and the benefits that arise out of AI. Let's talk about the need to regulate and govern this critical domain and what are the global trends that exist today, so that you have a thorough, comprehensive understanding of this topic. See, today's world is said to be driven by emerging and critical technologies such as artificial intelligence. When I say emerging and critical technologies, it refers to neural networks and machine learning, robotics and artificial intelligence. It also includes 5G networks, Internet of Things, big data. All these new technologies that you read about, they fall under the category of emerging and critical technologies. And one of the key pillars in this sector is artificial intelligence. AI is said to be the driver of the fourth stage of the industrial revolution that is currently going on in the global economy. The industrial revolution can be categorized into 4 stages. If the first stage of industrial revolution back in 17 and 1800s, if it was driven by steam and mechanization, the second stage of industrial revolution was driven by mass production, assembly line, and the usage of electricity, the widespread usage of electricity in mass production. We saw this second stage emerge around 1930s, and it dominated the global economy at that point of time. Then around 1970s, we saw the rise and emergence of third stage of industrial revolution with the applications of computing, with the usage of automation, with the emergence of mobile phones, internet, communication networks, etc. These technologies and processes drove the third stage of industrial revolution. Now, in the last 15 years, or maybe even 2 decades, we have entered the fourth stage of industrial revolution, which is primarily driven by your emerging and critical technologies. This includes artificial intelligence, the prime driver of fourth stage of industrial industrial revolution, along with associated and related technologies such as robotics, cyber physical systems, cloud computing, then 5G networks and high-speed communication, big data, Internet of Things, all these technologies, they are driving the fourth stage of the industrial revolution. Today, AI has widespread application in the industry. And it's not just civilian application, it even has a lot of military applications. In our day-to-day life, we are already using AI with or without our knowledge. Every time you search something on Google, right, when you, let's say, use facial recognition on your phones, when you make use of a voice assistance, like Siri, for example, on Apple platforms, or Alexa, right, you are essentially part of the AI ecosystem. You are making use of AI-based technologies. Today, across sectors, be it education, be it healthcare, be it in defense, in industrial production, across these sectors, AI is already playing a critical role. It's no longer a futuristic technology, it is something that we are already using on a day-to-day basis. Security, law enforcement agencies, they are using facial recognition technology which is powered by AI. Similarly, the healthcare sector is using artificial intelligence for early diagnosis of cancer, for better diagnosis, for better treatment. In education, in the job sector, in the labor market, in industrial production, in agriculture, in almost every sector, AI has already found a vital application. You have smart agriculture today, smart farms, where farming is driven by AI-controlled algorithms or interconnected network of sensors which are driven by AI algorithms. You see the same happening in the defense military domain as well. You have automated drones, you have smart ammunition which are powered by AI algorithms. So considering the widespread applications of artificial intelligence, it becomes very, very important to understand the risks and concerns associated with them. Especially in the last few months, AI has captured the popular attention of media and the public because of generative AI platforms such as ChatGPT and Google Bard, which gained a lot of publicity and a lot of attention. These are AI algorithms which are essentially chatbots that have been fed with large language model data. They are fed with very, very large volumes of data. They have learned over the years from various data which has been fed, and today they are able to generate original looking content. ChatGPT can write poems and stories on its own. It can write research articles. It can even appear at tests and examinations and try to crack your tests and examinations. Similarly, Google Bard, which is a Google AI tool, is powering Google search, right? ChatGPT, which was developed by open source AI, has been owned by Microsoft, and Microsoft has pioneered the technology and it has started applying it in its search platform, that is Bing. There are many other generative AI platforms which have come up, which can generate images, which can generate songs and even write stories, fictional stories. But despite all the advantages they bring in, and despite the huge applications they provide for, there are a lot of risks and concerns associated with them. The biggest fear is that these technologies could easily replace several manual jobs and tasks. This is quite a real concern. It is possible for a platform like ChatGPT to take out millions of routine manual jobs. Let's say there is someone who is managing a social media community, writing descriptions, writing titles, creating tags. This is something an AI platform like ChatGPT can easily take over. You don't need human intervention at all. An AI platform can easily do the task. There are many such routine tasks in the industry which can be taken over and replaced by these platforms. Other than that, there are many ethical concerns. Ethical concerns about how AI platforms are being used. Because in many instances, the creators of these algorithms, they themselves will not have control over these programs. They themselves will not be able to explain and understand how exactly the algorithm is going to function once they deploy it. So given these risk factors, AI can affect our society, our economy in many innumerable ways, in things that we can't even comprehend as of now. It can have a huge social impact, it can have a legal impact, economic impact, and it can affect the society, it can affect your fundamental rights, it can threaten democracies, and it can raise several ethical, moral questions as well. That is why there is a demand from several leading figures around the world to regulate this powerful technology. AI is no doubt one of the most powerful technologies that humans have developed. Just like any other technology, AI has the power to bring a lot of benefits. Technology is always a leveler. It creates a level playing field, it wipes out the barriers and hurdles and creates opportunities for everyone. These are the strengths of AI or any new technology. But its strength could become its weakness. There are several drawbacks if this technology falls in the wrong hands, if it is used for the wrong purpose, or if it is not well designed and well developed, right? It could lead to devastating consequences. Of course, we are not talking about the rise of the machines here, which is usually the stuff of sci-fi or science fiction, although you can't rule that out. But definitely, the various social, economic, political, legal concerns that come out of AI is something that needs to be addressed as soon as possible. In fact, several leading figures, they themselves are arguing for regulating AI. Recently, Geoffrey Hinton, I don't know if you've heard of him, he's a very, very popular figure. He's considered as the godfather of AI. He's a British researcher who used to work for Google. He used to head Google's AI division for many years, and he has made an immense contribution to the world of artificial intelligence. In fact, the neural networks that you hear about, machine learning algorithms which learn through data sets, which almost replicate the functioning of human neurons and form a neural network. These technologies were pioneered by Geoffrey Hinton and his team. So he's considered as the pioneer of AI, the godfather of AI. Recently, he has quit Google. He quit the company itself. Why? Because he wanted to raise his voice independently about the risks associated with AI technology. The godfather of AI is warning us that the technology can be misused. There are numerous possibilities where a lot of bad things can be done by bad actors by using AI technology. For example, in an authoritarian country, AI tools can be deployed for mass surveillance. A government might use AI tools to cripple dissent and opposition and target criticism. At the end of the day, AI algorithms, they have learned from the data which has been fed into these algorithms. And the data which comes from the real world is already biased. All the biases we have in our society, the social divides that we have, right? Caste-based bias, color-based bias, gender-based bias, religion-based bias. This bias that already exists in our societies would have crept into the data that we are generating. So if the algorithms, if the neural networks are learning from this set of data, which is already biased, they will incorporate those biases as well. And we have already seen this in the real world, especially in facial recognition technology. When facial recognition is used for security purposes by law enforcement and intelligence agencies, it has been noted that AI algorithms have a bias against minorities, against blacks, against religious minorities, linguistic and ethnic minorities. They are being flagged and pointed out by the algorithm as compared to the majority communities. This is clearly a flaw in the very design of the technology because the data which the tools are being fed with in itself is biased. So how do you address these challenges? This is just a small sample of what I'm trying to highlight. Similar concerns were expressed by other leading AI visionaries and technology leaders, including Elon Musk, the CEO of Twitter and Tesla and SpaceX, and even by Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple. Recently, all these top entrepreneurs, they wrote an open letter calling for an immediate stop of training and development of AI models that are more powerful than GPT-4. GPT-4 is the latest variant of generative AI released by open source AI. All these top technology leaders, they have called for a stop on further training AI models as they perceive an immediate threat to humanity and society, to the very civilized open society that we have built. They have written in the letter that powerful AI systems should be developed only once we are confident that their effects will be positive and their risks can be manageable. Which means we should have regulation in place. We should have enough confidence that we should be able to control the AI systems the way we want. This concern comes up because many researchers believe that AI is essentially a black box. AI tools and algorithms are referred to as black boxes, meaning you don't really know what's hidden inside it. The developers themselves who have written the code, who have developed these algorithms, they themselves cannot predict how exactly their algorithm is going to function, what exactly would be the output. Because these are self-learning algorithms, they learn as they are deployed, and they continue to evolve over a period of time. So through this evolution, the algorithm acquires a very different form than what it was designed for, than how it was designed by the actual coders and programmers. So since it's very hard to be transparent here, you can't explain how it exactly functions. You can't really predict what is going to be its consistent output. AI tools and technologies are often referred to as black boxes, meaning you don't really know what's hidden inside it. So this has given rise to many more concerns, including copyright infringement and plagiarism. Generative AI platforms like ChatGPT have written a lot of articles, stories, etc. But apparently many of them were plagiarized. It was a breach of copyrights and intellectual property. So this raises a lot of legal concerns as well. We have seen many such issues crop up. Now let's say tomorrow a government starts using AI tools, biometric based identification for providing welfare benefits or providing access to public spaces. But if the AI tool itself is biased, it is flawed in its functioning, and if it denies access to people, or if it cuts off government services and welfare for the public, then that erodes your socio-economic welfare programs. It could erode your democracy and fundamental rights as well. It could threaten the very democratic order that we have built. So there are very serious concerns to society and humanity, which has been flagged by several top researchers and leaders as well. From Jeffrey Hinton to Elon Musk to Steve Wozniak, they've all pointed out these concerns, and they have urged global policy makers to act immediately to come out with a robust regulation and governance system. So this serves as a justification for regulating AI. There is an urgent and immediate need to regulate artificial intelligence. There is no doubt about it. So in this regard, the European Union has taken the first major step. The EU has proposed a landmark law, the AI Act, and the draft of this has been brought into the European Parliament. This has huge implications for the world, because even other countries like India can draw lessons from this. Even India is thinking on these lines. How do we regulate AI? How do we contain, manage the risks arising out of AI? So countries would be watching for these developments in European Union, and hence this proposed AI Act by EU is very important for our exams. The draft of this law was actually proposed in 2021. It has been fine-tuned from there onwards, and it focuses on striking a balance between development of AI technology in order to promote research and innovation while restricting its harmful impact, while restricting and regulating the harmful impact of AI technologies. This is the challenge for any law that seeks to regulate artificial intelligence. On one hand, you need to deal with the negative fallout, the side effects, the harmful effects. There are some technologies which may have to be prohibited entirely. Some have to be regulated with restrictions. There should be thorough review, monitoring. But this should not end up stifling research and innovation. It should not cripple the scientific research in the field of artificial intelligence. It should not push away investors and researchers from the AI domain because AI has tremendous potential as well. So any law that seeks to regulate should strike that balance, and that's exactly what EU is hoping for. It's looking to address the ethical questions that have come up along with the legal, political and economic concerns. It seeks to mitigate the risks to human safety, health, fundamental rights, and more importantly, the democratic values of the European Union. The EU is a 27-country grouping of all the developed democratic nations of European Union. So obviously, fundamental rights, democratic rights are very crucial to the EU. It's the very foundation of the EU. So the law is trying to ensure the technology does not threaten the very democratic foundation of the Western countries, while restricting and regulating its usage in key sectors like education, healthcare, law enforcement, etc. This is actually quite similar to the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation of the European Union, which was brought out in 2018. This was EU's law to deal with data protection. The GDPR is considered as a model law in the world when it comes to data protection and data security. The EU set an example. It led the world from the front by coming out with GDPR, which is a data protection regime for the European Union. In fact, India also draws lessons from the GDPR of European Union. India is struggling to come out with a data protection law, and even we have drawn some lessons from the GDPR of European Union. So just like the EU set an example for the world through its GDPR with regard to data protection, it's planning the same for artificial intelligence as well. The EU wants to lead from the front in this critical area, establish the market standards, establish the regulatory guidelines, and ensure that technology is not misused for the wrong reasons. Ensure that AI and its harmful impact can be minimized and regulated in order to protect the fundamental rights and democratic values of these countries. So if you look at the key provisions, you will find that there are some very, very important points that European Union has actually addressed. Let's quickly go through the key provisions that have been proposed in the draft act. The EU's AI Act defines what is artificial intelligence. It defines that AI is an algorithm or a software which can predict, which can recommend, which can learn. So a proper definition of AI has been given along with identifying the various AI tools, including generative artificial intelligence. The central approach of the Act is to classify AI technology based on the level of risk they pose to human society. 4 categories have been identified. 4 risk categories are defined under the Act. This includes unacceptable, high risk, limited risk, and minimal risk. So any AI technology or tool that will be developed in European Union and deployed in European Union, it will have to be classified under these 4 risk categories. Depending on its functions, its applications, and impact, they will be categorized into these 4 risk categories. Those coming under unacceptable and high risk category will be subjected to prohibition and very, very strict regulation. Unacceptable AI tools and technologies will be prohibited entirely. For example, facial and biometric systems which limit access to public spaces could be prohibited. Because of the biases in the data, minorities could be targeted and left out through these faulty AI systems. This threatens your fundamental rights. It's a threat to democratic order itself. Hence, such technologies could be entirely prohibited by European Union by categorizing them as unacceptable. The risk would be unacceptable. Any AI tool through which governments can score their citizens. If governments are trying to create profiles of their citizens through an AI tool, such platforms could be prohibited entirely. So any other AI tool which has a detrimental impact on key sectors like healthcare, education, those AI tools through which you can engineer the minds of the people and the society, through which you can manipulate the choices made by people, right? Which is essentially social engineering. Such tools, and also those AI tools which probably discriminate against the marginalized, the old people, disabled, young, minorities, etc., all such tools could be prohibited as they pose unacceptable risk to a modern democratic society. So a risk-based categorization is being provided for by the EU. For the rest of the categories, there would be a set of regulations that will apply, and a database would be created for the high-risk systems, which allows for even future technologies to be classified under the high-risk category. Because this is an evolving field, new technologies will keep coming up. So a European Union-wide database will be set up that will list all the AI tools and algorithms which are being used, and they'll be categorized accordingly, and under the high-risk category especially, even future technologies that come up can be included. These technologies, which are classified based on the risk level, they will have to meet certain criteria before they are introduced in the market. Now, let's say a new AI tool has been developed. Before it hits the market, before it becomes available for public use, there will be a pre-market conformity assessment. It will be a mandatory requirement where a thorough review of the algorithm will be done by a regulatory authority to assess its social and legal impact. This is a mechanism the EU is proposing, a regulatory mechanism where before a tool hits the market, before it becomes available for the public, it will be reviewed. There will be a conformity assessment. These AI algorithms, they have to conform to a set of standards, to a set of regulatory standards. So the data set through which the AI tools have learned, those data sets will be reviewed very strictly by the regulatory authority to ensure that no biases will creep into the data, and thus ensure that these tools are bias free. So a mandatory conformity test will be obligated under the new law. It will be a pre-market condition before the tool hits the market. And it requires the AI algorithms to be as transparent as possible. The technology should be explainable. If a company has developed it, if a set of researchers have coded this program, they should be able to explain how it actually works. It shouldn't be a black box. Black box AI technologies are unacceptable. Researchers and developers themselves cannot know how it will not function, how it might function, right? So such technologies will be classified as unacceptable or high risk, and they should be explainable. They should have human oversight. It should be able to allow for human intervention if required. So these capabilities have to be built into the AI algorithms. These would be made mandatory requirements. And once the tool hits the market, once it has been deployed, there will be few post-monitoring or post-market obligations as well for regular review and monitoring. Because as I told you, AI algorithms, they keep evolving. They learn as they are deployed. Right? These are machine learning algorithms. These are neural networks which keep evolving and learning. So it's not just necessary to screen the data sets prior to their deployment, but even after deployment, it is important to monitor and review its functioning to ensure that these tools are not threatening human rights and any legal and social rights. So that is why post-market monitoring obligations are also being proposed by the European Union. So this is a landmark step by the EU. There have been mixed concerns from the industry. Mixed response has come from the AI industry. Some of the companies have welcomed it. They've said it's a good development, it's good to regulate AI. Some have expressed concerns because they feel that these proposed regulations are very, very strict and it could cripple innovation and development. However, if you look at the global trend, it is EU which has taken the lead within the Western democratic world. Because if you look at other leading powers such as US does not have any law as such to regulate AI. In the US, there is a fairly hands-off approach that the administration has taken when it comes to regulating AI. The Biden administration has only come out with a Bill of Rights, the AI BOR. Please make a note of this. US has recently come out with the AI Bill of Rights. It was drafted by the White House itself. It's only a recommendatory standard. It's just a guideline. It's a handbook which acts as a guiding mechanism to protect economic and civil rights. And it lays down 5 principles of mitigating any harms associated with AI. But it's not a law. It's not a binding mandatory law. It is just a guide. It is just a handbook giving few recommendations to the industry, lays down 5 principles on how the risks can be mitigated, and identifies the harms from AI to economic and civil rights. So this is what US has done. It hasn't come out with any law as such, it doesn't have any strict regulation, but it has come out with a set of Bill of Rights. China, on the other hand, which is an authoritarian country, became the world's first major country to come out with nationally binding regulations last year. In 2022, China came out with a set of very strict regulations for the AI industry, because China is mainly concerned about how AI will affect the dissemination of information. I hope you know that the Communist Party of China is an authoritarian party. It leads an authoritarian government where it does not provide basic democratic rights. Right to free speech, right to expression, right to free press, they're all curbed in the communist state. So China has censored the press. It has even censored the internet and social media. Now China is concerned that AI tools could be used by dissidents to freely disseminate information, which is a threat to the control, the authoritarian control of the Communist Party. So mainly from a security point of view, based on national security considerations, China has brought out these strict regulations that places few binding regulations on the AI industry. But that is not an example for us because China is an authoritarian state. But if you look at other Western countries, US has only come out with a Bill of Rights, but European Union has taken the first major step towards introducing a law to regulate AI. Similar debates are taking place in India as well. The government of India is also considering regulation of AI, maybe through a law. The Niti Aayog has even brought out a research paper in this regard. But however, India is still far behind the curve. We don't even have a data protection law, right? A data protection law is a prerequisite to regulate emerging critical technologies like artificial intelligence. Maybe in the coming years, India will also come out with a regulatory framework, maybe a law to regulate AI. And if we do that, we will definitely be drawing lessons from this law that has been proposed by the European Union. That is why the topic is so important for your prelims, your mains. You can even expect an essay topic on this. So I hope it's been a detailed discussion. I hope you've understood everything. Just let me know if you have any specific doubts on this topic. Benazir Sheikh is asking, Niti Aayog has made what? Niti Aayog has studied the implications of artificial intelligence and it has recommended to the government to come out with a regulatory framework to regulate AI. Okay, now let's move to the next article from page number 7. On page number 7, the Hindu carries a set of infographics and it helps us understand a key topic that has been trending called Laundromat countries. Recently, a paper was brought out by the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air. It's a Helsinki-based think tank. And it brought out a research paper in which few countries have been labeled as laundromat countries. Essentially, it means these are countries that are enabling laundering. Laundering of what? Laundering of Russian oil and gas. The report has alleged that countries like India, China, Singapore, United Arab Emirates and Turkey, these countries have bypassed the Western economic sanctions on Russia. They have continued purchasing Russian oil and gas and they have reprocessed it and they are re-exporting it to Western markets, to European countries essentially and Western countries which are actually part of the price cap coalition. See, as Russia went to war with Ukraine, Western countries targeted Russia with crippling economic sanctions. Their main objective was to cripple Russia of its revenue in order to ensure that Russia is under the economic pressure to push Russia away from this conflict. But several countries which are very close friends of Russia like India, China and others, they have bypassed the Western sanctions because we don't follow unilateral sanctions. These Western economic sanctions, they always have a geopolitical angle behind it. Our interests are not served by following Western economic sanctions against Russia. Russia has been a time-tested friend for India. More importantly, there's nothing much a country like India can do when it comes to intervening in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So India has pursued its national interests. We have maintained our close ties with Russia. We have never criticized Russia for the war, never voted against Russia at the UN. We have abstained from all the votes. And more importantly, we chose to bypass the Western sanctions against Russia. We have imported Russian oil and gas in very, very large quantities. And in the last 15 months, Russia has become the second top oil and gas supplier to India. Usually it was Saudi Arabia at the second position after Iraq. Iraq is usually the top supplier of oil and gas to India, followed by Saudi Arabia, and then it would be Russia usually. But now Russia has occupied the second spot because we have procured large quantities of Russian oil and gas as Russia has been selling it at a discounted price. So this eases our import bill as well, reduces our deficit, trade deficit, because we are getting a reliable, cheap supplier of oil and gas. Plus it sustains our strategic ties with Russia, which has been a close all-weather friend and a time-tested partner for India. Now the problem is, Indian petrochemical refiners, they are processing the Russian crude, the Russian gas that we are receiving, turning it into various petrochemical products, and we are re-exporting this back to European markets. Look at the irony of this. Essentially, Western sanctions are getting bypassed. European companies are purchasing petroleum products from Indian companies, from Indian refiners, thereby limiting the impact of the sanctions on Russia. So that is why this think tank has labeled these countries as laundromat countries. See, this is a very strong term to be used. The term laundromat is often used in the case of organized crime, where mafias engage in the practice of laundering. I'm sure you guys would have heard about a type of organized crime called money laundering. So what do you mean by laundering here? See, generally laundering means to wash, right? We say we take our clothes to the laundry or we launder the clothes. What do you mean? You are washing your dirty clothes, removing the dirt, making it clean clothes. You're whitewashing your clothes, correct? That's a regular usage. But in the world of organized crime, with regard to money laundering, the term laundering acquires a slightly different meaning. Is that clear? Essentially, in money laundering, you're taking dirty money, that is illegal wealth generated through illicit criminal activities like drug trafficking, corruption, etc. You're taking such dirty money which has dirt associated with it, and through a process you're washing the dirt. Not literally, of course, but you're cleaning the dirt. You're distancing the money from the actual source, from the owner. So you're converting this illegal wealth into legal wealth. And thus that process of cleaning the money is called laundering. You're washing the money, you're laundering the money. So the term is used in the case of organized crime, which is often carried out by several mafias and criminal organizations. So the usage of this term laundromat is a very strong term for countries like India, because essentially this organization and few Western countries, they're accusing India of laundering Russian oil. Essentially, we are taking Russian oil, refining it, turning it into products, and indirectly sending it back to those countries which essentially had banned them. European countries have tried to reduce their dependency on Russian oil and gas, but they have ended up buying Russian oil and gas through India, through China, through Turkey. This highlights the impact of globalization as well. This is not deliberate. It's not that India is deliberately doing this. This is an outcome of globalization. This is how the global economy functions. Right? You take materials from several countries, process it in many different countries. Eventually it is used in some other country. That is why the impact of sanctions is questionable. Right? Western countries had formed this coalition called the Price Cap Coalition. US and European countries, essentially the G7 countries, the 7 industrialized nations along with European Union, Australia and Japan. These countries, they formed the Price Cap Coalition and placed a price cap on Russian oil. They said no company should purchase Russian oil beyond this price cap. Their objective was to limit the profits for Russia without disrupting the global oil market. Because if there is a complete ban on Russian oil exports, it will disrupt the global oil market, because Russia is a major oil supplier, a major oil exporter. So to balance this out, these Western countries, that is G7 countries, Australia, Japan and European Union, they formed the Price Cap Coalition and placed a price cap. But countries like India, China, Singapore, Turkey, UAE, which are all close to Russia, they have breached the price cap. We have continued purchasing Russian oil even beyond the price cap. Our refiners have used Russian oil and gas, turned it into various products. We are re-exporting this. And recently there was a report that India has sent a record number of petrochemical products to European markets. Indian refiners like Reliance and various other major refiners, they have been sending record volume of petrochemical products to European countries. Right? See, India is deficient in fossil fuels. 85% of our crude oil requirement is imported. But our refining capacity is so strong that we are making use of Russian oil and gas. It's not only meeting our domestic requirement, but we are exporting, re-exporting the products to other markets, back to Western countries as well. Just look at the graph here. Look at how the petrochemical exports of these laundromat countries has increased after the Russia-Ukraine war. Look at the jump in India's exports. In just one and a half year, as the sanctions against Russia began, there is an exponential jump in the petrochemical exports of India and China. Both India and China are actually deficient in petrochemical reserves. We don't have enough hydrocarbons. We rely mainly on imports. The reason why our exports have jumped is because we have been the biggest purchasers of Russian oil and gas, which is under sanctions. So that is why these Western think tanks are labeling it as a laundering practice. That's why they're calling these countries as laundromat countries, which are enabling Russian oil to be indirectly be sold into European market. Just look at the graph here, you'll get a better picture. This is the imported oil and gas from Russia by the laundromat countries. Look at the volume that India and China have purchased. They account for the biggest purchase of Russian oil and gas in the last one and a half years. Now they have turned this into various petrochemical products and they are re-exporting this back to the Western countries. Now this is quite comical as well. It's hysterical as well. Because essentially the Western sanctions are getting defeated. It's getting bypassed. The very purpose of the sanction was to reduce European dependency on Russian oil and gas. But indirectly, the same situation continues as these laundromat countries, so-called laundromat countries, are exporting the same Russian oil and gas and the products back into those Western and European markets. Alright, so this is the trend that you need to understand and the recent development that you should be aware of. Now moving on to the next article on page number 6. We have a very interesting and a very important article written by Air Vice Marshal Manmohan Bahadur. He's a retired Air Vice Marshal from the Indian Air Force. He's talking about the relevance and importance of special operations. He's talking about India's recent evacuation efforts in Sudan, where the Indian Air Force carried out a daring mission to evacuate Indians who were trapped in the Sudanese civil war. We have been talking about this incident for many days. We spoke about the Sudan civil war in detail. We have understood India's evacuation mission, that is Operation Kaveri. Around 4,000 Indians have been rescued and brought back via Saudi Arabia, via Jeddah. Right? Through the port of Sudan, thousands of Indians have been evacuated through the Indian Navy and even by the Indian Air Force. Here in this article, the writer is focusing on one specific mission that was carried out under Operation Kaveri. It's called the Wadi Sedina mission. Wadi Sedina is a place in Sudan. It's around 40 kilometers to the north of Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. At this place, a few hundred Indians were trapped. They had no way to reach Khartoum or port of Sudan. So the Indian Air Force, which had set up a base in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia across the Red Sea, carried out a daring military operation. It was a special operation using special military assets of the Indian Air Force. The C-130J Super Hercules, which is a tactical transport aircraft that we have procured from the US, was deployed by the Indian Air Force along with Garud commandos. The Garuds are a special force of the Indian Air Force. Is that clear? See, we have a number of special forces in India. For example, the Para Commandos, the Para SF of the Indian Army, the Marcos, the Marine Commandos of the Indian Navy. Similarly, Indian Air Force has its own special force unit called the Garud Commandos. We also have the SFF, the Special Frontier Force, one of India's most secretive special force units, which is seen as the armed branch of RAW, the Research and Analysis Wing, which is India's foreign intelligence agency. We even have NSG, the National Security Guards, which is also a special force, and it's a central armed police force under the Ministry of Home Affairs. So these elite forces are called special forces. Similarly, every country, every armed force will have its own special force unit. They engage in a very unique military operation that is often named as special operations or special ops. So what do you mean by this? What do you mean by a special operation? According to NATO, a special operation is such a military operation in which specially designated, specially organized, selected, trained and equipped forces are used in an unconventional method through unconventional modes of employment. Is that clear? Special forces are very small units. They are very differently organized than your regular armed forces and security forces. They are very well trained. They go through a very rigorous selection and training process. And they are very well equipped. They are given the best of the best equipment. Only the best of the best soldiers make it to these special force units. And they are highly motivated as well. Only the physically strong, mentally strong make it to these special forces. They receive the best of training, the most rigorous training, and they are given the best of weapons, gadgets and technology tools to ensure success in their missions. They are often known to specialize in covert operations, even behind enemy lines. If required, these forces can be deployed behind enemy lines. They can operate secretly, covertly to achieve their set targets. You might have heard about the Navy SEALs of the US. How the US Navy SEALs conducted a raid in Pakistan at Abbottabad to eliminate Osama bin Laden. That was a special force operation, a covert operation. Right? India carried out a similar surgical strike in Pakistan after the Uri attacks. It was a special operation carried out by the Para-SF, the Para Commandos of the Indian Army. Similar surgical strikes were conducted in Myanmar as well a few years back to target few northeast insurgents who were threatening India. So India has a history of such special operations. From many, many decades, Indian special forces have been used in various theaters of conflict. Several other countries as well, Israel, Russia, Germany, Britain, France, US, all these major powers, right? They will have their own special force units conducting their special operations. Now in this case, with regard to the evacuation which happened from Sudan, even though it was not a combat mission, it was not a combat role, in a non-combat capacity, a special operation was executed by the Indian Air Force. Because as I told you, at Wadi Sedan, which is basically a desert located away from Khartoum in Sudan, hundreds of Indians were trapped. There was no way for them to reach a point of evacuation. So what the Indian Air Force did was, a special aircraft was deployed, the C-130J Super Hercules. It is mainly used for tactical airlift. It is used to deploy special operators who belong to special forces. It can land in very short, unprepared runways and it can take off very quickly. We have another similar aircraft called C-17 Globemaster. Even this has been procured from US. C-17 Globemaster is a gigantic aircraft. It is many times bigger than C-130J Super Hercules. C-17 Globemaster is a strategic airlift transport aircraft. It can lift troops, even equipment, even vehicles and artillery guns, and even helicopters can be fitted inside a C-17. They're that massive. And in the recent past, we have conducted many evacuation missions, and every time these are the tactical strategic aircraft that India has deployed. The C-130J, C-17, and they are accompanied with Garud commandos. For example, when we conducted Operation Rahat in 2015 in Yemen to rescue 5,000 Indians, the Indian Navy had been deployed along with Marcos, the Marine Commandos. They were securing the naval assets, securing the Indians, ensuring that they got on board safe, because they were being deployed in a conflict zone where a conflict was taking place between the Houthi rebels and the Yemeni government. We had another similar incident in Afghanistan in 2020 and as well as in 2021. As the situation was deteriorating in 2020, as Taliban was rising and it was almost controlling the country, the Indian consulate at Herat was under threat. So the Indian consulate officials, Indian diplomats and other officers who were deployed here, they had to be evacuated in an emergency mission, which was a special operation conducted by the Indian Air Force. And last year, that is in 2021, a couple of years ago, when Taliban took over Afghanistan eventually and captured Kabul, India launched Operation Devi Shakti to bring back the Indians who were trapped in Kabul. This was another similar special operation. Let me tell you what is common between these three missions. Between these missions in Afghanistan and the Wadi Sedna mission in Sudan. The common factor is that this evacuation was pulled off by the Indian Air Force under very, very challenging circumstances. At Wadi Sedna, where the Indians were trapped, there was no proper airport or runway. It was a semi-prepared airstrip. There were no lights, no floodlights, no night lighting was available, no landing aids, no navigation, no communication. The Indian Air Force went in blind. The C-130J had to be piloted without any prior intelligence. There could be hostile elements on the ground, and it had to land without any navigational aid. And in an ingenious technique, the Indian Air Force pilots who have received these special operations training, they landed just by using night vision goggles. Without the help of any landing, navigation and communication aid, they landed with night vision goggles, and the Garud commandos secured the aircraft and the Indian passengers and got them on board. And throughout this mission, the plane was kept running. The plane would land quickly in a few minutes. It would keep running until everyone is on board, and it takes off immediately. Similar missions were carried out in Afghanistan, in Herat and Kabul, when Indian diplomats were evacuated and when Indians were brought back under Operation Devi Shakti. Right? It was a very challenging situation. When Taliban had taken over Kabul, there was no one to control and operate the Kabul airport. There was no ATC, no communication, no landing and navigation aid. There were multiple aircrafts in the air as countries were rushing to evacuate their citizens. So in a blind environment, in a blind airspace, Indian Air Force had to navigate. The C-130J landed Kabul, and this was also done by using night vision goggles. These are special operations conducted under very, very challenging circumstances. So the writer says these are daring missions that have been carried out by the Indian Air Force, and they deserve credit for the capabilities they have built up. The writer even says, had we had these capabilities back in 1999, maybe things would have been different with regard to IC-814 hijacking. Back in 1999, an Indian aircraft IC-814 coming from Nepal to India, from Kathmandu to Delhi, was hijacked by Pakistani terrorists. The hijacked aircraft was taken out of Indian airspace because India failed to implement the SOPs, the standard operating procedures that are meant to be implemented during a hijacking incident. The then Vajpayee government failed to handle the situation effectively. There was tremendous public and media pressure. As the SOPs were not followed, the aircraft was allowed to leave Indian airspace and it went to Pakistan. It tried to land at Lahore for refueling. Alright, it had briefly stopped at Amritsar after the hijacking, where ideally India should have disabled the aircraft, prevented it from flying out. But as India failed in its SOPs, the aircraft took off to Pakistan and briefly landed at Lahore. Pakistan wouldn't allow the hijacked aircraft to remain on its soil, so the hijackers took the aircraft to Dubai in United Arab Emirates. From here, they flew the aircraft to Kandahar in Afghanistan, which back in 1999 was ruled by the Taliban. And don't forget, Kandahar is the hotbed of Taliban. So there was no question for India to carry out any sort of military raid or a commando operation to ensure the safe release of the hostages. So the writer says, maybe if we had these special operations capabilities with special airlift and commandos like the Garud commandos, maybe such a mission could have been thought about. Because this was a disastrous incident for India, as the Vajpayee government was forced by the hijackers to release 3 dreaded terrorists. One of them was Masood Azhar, the founder of Jaish-e-Mohammed. After he was released from Indian custody, he would go on to set up Jaish-e-Mohammed that has carried out many major terror attacks against India. Right? India couldn't think of such a daring operation because there was no way for India to fly over Pakistani airspace or enter Afghanistan without refueling. We didn't have those kind of airlift capabilities. The writer says today we have built up those capabilities. Through our military modernization, through better training, through better investments in our special forces, Indian Air Force has built these capabilities. Subsequent governments have taken the right decisions to procure aircrafts like C-130J and C-17. Special forces like Garud, Para-SF have been raised, they have been well trained, well equipped. And this gives India the ability to even carry out a military intervention if required. Because eventually, these operations, they do reflect our strategic ambitions. Several experts believe that special force operatives, the commandos, they are like the strategic corporals of the nation. They represent the nation. Their actions on the battlefield will actually have very serious implications on the foreign policy and national security policy of the country. For example, in 1976, an Israeli aircraft had been hijacked by Palestinian terrorists, and the hijacked aircraft had landed in Uganda, and Israel flew its commandos all the way to Uganda. They carried out a daring military raid and secured all the hostages. The US has done many such successful operations as well to rescue hostages in Iran, to assassinate Osama bin Laden. All these were special missions carried out by American special forces. But these missions can go wrong as well. These special operations can easily go wrong. The US has a lot of experience with this. So the whole point of the writer here is that one should understand the essence and the significance of special operation capabilities. For any armed force, it's very, very important to build up the special operations capabilities, to have these elite special forces who are very well organized, very well trained, given the best of equipment, so that they can conduct these challenging missions which serve a major strategic purpose. It could change the course of geopolitics itself. All right? So that is why the writer is insisting on focusing on the training and motivation of India's special forces, and is calling upon the government to pay more attention to the training and modernization of Indian special forces. So this is what you take away from this important article. The topic is very relevant from the security and defense point of view, so you can expect a question in GS paper 3. UPSC might ask you to illustrate the role of special forces in fulfilling India's national interests. So that is why the article is very important. So with this, I complete my discussion on the big articles for today. Now we move to the prelim section, where we take a brief look at some of the important smaller articles in the newspaper. On page number 1, we have an article related to National Company Law Tribunal. It's in news because another Indian airline has crashed. Sorry for the pun, but yes, Go First, or previously known as Go Air, has filed for bankruptcy. Recently, Jet Airways similarly failed and crashed, and now Go First has become another Indian airline to have suffered insolvency and bankruptcy. It has run up loans to the tunes of 11,000 crore rupees. This could have significant impact on the banking sector as well, right? These loans have become non-performing assets. Without enough cash to continue operations, Go First has suspended operations, and it has approached NCLT, and it has filed for insolvency and bankruptcy as per the provisions of the IBC code, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So in this context, NCLT becomes important for your prelims. You should know what is NCLT, what is its role, how is it established, what are the powers of NCLT. You can expect a prelims question here. The National Company Law Tribunal has been set up under the provisions of the Companies Act of 2013. Under section 410, the National Company Law Tribunal has been set up. So it's essentially a quasi-judicial body, and its primary purpose is to help resolve such cases of insolvency and bankruptcy. If companies are shutting down and closing down, right, if they have become insolvent and bankrupt, settling those issues, handling the entire bankruptcy proceedings, clearing of the pending dues, taking care of the employees, right? Handling that whole closure of the company is the task of NCLT. It provides rulings, it provides arbitration, which helps companies to shut down their operations in line with the provisions of the Companies Act of 2013. All right? There is an appellate body as well. There are around 15 benches of NCLT, the National Company Law Tribunal. There are 15 different benches across the country. And you can appeal against the rulings and decisions at the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. Finally, the companies, if they are not happy with the rulings, they can even approach the Supreme Court. Is that clear? So these tribunals are headed by a president, who's usually a former retired judge, and the tribunal includes judicial members and technical members. It includes retired judges from high courts and lower courts as well, and few technical members with corporate experience, legal and economic experience. So the tribunal takes a call on the dissolution of companies that have failed. If companies are filing for insolvency and bankruptcy, the proceedings under IBC code, the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, is handled by the National Company Law Tribunal. Is that clear? That is the primary objective of NCLT. So in case of insolvency bankruptcy, the companies cannot approach a civil court directly. They have no jurisdiction now. NCLT has direct jurisdiction. So companies have to directly approach this quasi-judicial body to get the insolvency bankruptcy proceedings resolved so that the company can close down in a formal manner. All right? So please note down these key points. Next, on page number 6, we have an editorial referring to some recent developments in Uzbekistan. Recently, Uzbekistan's president held a referendum where apparently 90% of the people have supported the referendum to rewrite the constitution of Uzbekistan. See, the details of this topic is not very important for our exams, but just the development could be important for prelims. UPSC might ask which country recently amended and rewrote its constitution, or which country in Central Asia has carried out a major constitutional reform following a referendum. A very straightforward, simple prelims question, right? Or maybe a map-based question on Uzbekistan, on where it is located. So please note that this Central Asian country, which is a former Soviet republic, it has been ruled by dictators for a number of years. The current president, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, even he is an authoritarian leader, but he has been credited with introducing a lot of reforms. Despite being a dictator kind of a leader, he has introduced a lot of reforms in the past. Socio-economic reforms have been introduced. Gender rights and fundamental rights have been promoted. Then domestic abuse and violence has been criminalized under his presidentship. So a lot of progressive changes have happened under this president. But he urged his people to give him an extended term because according to the previous constitution of Uzbekistan, the presidents have a cap on their term. They can only occupy the president office for 2 terms. So this president, who's currently 65 years old, he's about to expire his term. Now he has approached his people and held a direct election. Referendum is basically a direct election where people cast a vote on a particular issue. Through this referendum, Uzbekistan's president had asked the support of his people to rewrite the entire constitution so that more progressive laws and changes can be introduced along with extending the term for himself. The president is resetting the presidential term. He will start from 0 again, meaning he'll have 2 more terms. And the 5-year presidential term is being extended to 7 years. So meaning if the constitution is rewritten according to the referendum, the president will have 14 more years in office. He's already had 2 terms. Now he'll have 14 more years in office. Essentially, this is how dictators continue their perpetual rule, right? Even though he's introduced few progressive changes and reforms, he is someone who is seen as a leader who does not want to give away his control over power. Alright, so that is why it's a significant development. A referendum was held where apparently 90% of the people have supported it to rewrite the constitution. Now, if you look at the map of Uzbekistan, it's a Central Asian country. The most unique point is that it's one of the few double landlocked countries in the world. See, landlocked countries are those countries which are entirely surrounded by land. They don't have direct access to the sea. Like Nepal, for example, Bhutan. They are surrounded by land. They have to depend on other countries to access the sea. Like Nepal depends on India to access Bay of Bengal, right? So landlocked countries have a natural disadvantage. But there are 2 countries in the world which are double landlocked, meaning they are surrounded entirely by landlocked countries. They have to cross 2 countries before reaching the sea. One is Uzbekistan, the other is Liechtenstein in Europe. These are the only 2 double landlocked countries. Uzbekistan is surrounded by Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. It shares a small border here with Afghanistan and Turkmenistan. It's surrounded by the other Central Asian countries, so it's double landlocked. Central Asia itself is a landlocked region, and between these Central Asian countries you have Uzbekistan, which makes it a double landlocked country. Now some of you might ask, sir, how about Caspian Sea? I can see that in the map. But please understand, Caspian Sea is not actually a sea, it's not an open sea. It's actually an endorheic lake, one of the world's largest lakes. Caspian Sea itself is landlocked, surrounded by land on all sides. It's not an open sea. So Uzbekistan is a double landlocked country, and please remember the neighboring countries. Very, very important for a map-based question. Next, on page number 10, we have an article related to World Press Freedom Index. The World Press Freedom Index can be very important for prelims. It's been brought out by RSF, Reporters Sans Frontières. It's similar to MSF, Medicine Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders. Previously, UPSC has asked a prelims question on Doctors Without Borders. MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, is an NGO of doctors and nurses who provide medical assistance in war zones, in disaster-hit areas, in Yemen, in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, in such places. MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, have given medical assistance. So that's why UPSC had already asked a prelims question on MSF, or Doctors Without Borders. Similarly, we have Reporters Without Borders, or RSF. This is an international NGO headquartered in Paris, and it has consultative status with the United Nations. It claims to represent reporters, journalists, and the media around the world. It brings out this annual index called the World Press Freedom Index, which estimates the extent of press freedom available in 180 countries and jurisdictions. In this report, India's ranking has dropped again. India's ranking has slipped to 161 out of 180 countries, meaning press freedom in India has been eroding, according to RSF. Is that clear? India's ranking has dropped. In the last year's index, India's rank was 150 out of 180 countries. Now the ranking has dropped to 161. But the Indian government rejects these findings. The government of India has always criticized the index, and we have challenged the methodology they use for computing the index. India says the index is biased. It is deliberately designed to target India, because India is a free democratic nation where freedom of press and speech is recognized constitutionally. Shockingly, India's ranking is below Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. Can you believe that? Right? Taliban governed Afghanistan is ranked above India. Sri Lanka, which is known for its authoritarian control over the press. Pakistan, which is controlled by the army, where the media is threatened by the army and the ISI, have been ranked higher than India. So India does have a valid ground here. India has questioned the methodology. We have criticized the index, and we reject such rankings. According to India, it's a flawed methodology. The countries which perform well on this index are European countries like Norway, Ireland, and Denmark. They're at the top 3. Whereas Vietnam, China, and North Korea, all the communist countries, they are at the bottom, right? Because in communist states, press freedom is never allowed. So India's ranking at 161 is quite concerning. There are some valid concerns because there are threats to the press. There are many cases where journalists are threatened, targeted, and attacked. Press freedom has been curbed through political pressure, through money, influence, or even through muscle power. There are many incidents across India to show that press freedom is under threat. But is it really that bad? Is it worse than what you have in Pakistan and Afghanistan? That is the question. So government's criticism is also valid, but the findings of the report cannot be dismissed, because there are serious threats and concerns to press freedom and to journalists when it comes to their reporting freedom. That is what you take away from this article. Next, on page number 11, we have an article related to India, Maldives. We spoke about this yesterday as well. India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh is on an important visit to Maldives. Yesterday, we learnt that India has gifted 2 naval vessels to Maldives, a fast attack craft and a landing craft to deploy troops. These 2 naval vessels have been gifted by India to Maldivian National Defense Forces. In the same visit, India has laid the foundation stone for Ekatha Harbour, which is a harbour and a port facility being built for Maldives Coast Guard, for the Maldivian Coast Guard. And it will come up at the Sifa Varu Island in Maldives. This harbour facility will be built by India through a grant in aid financial assistance. India has given a grant. India will be investing in this strategic defense project in Maldives to provide a harbour and docking facility for Maldivian Coast Guard. India will be building the Ekatha Harbour, the Unity Harbour, right? apparently it can be used by Indian Coast Guard and Indian Navy as well if required, essentially turning this into a potential foreign military base for India. So China, which is in competition here, already has taken lease of an important island in Maldives called Fedu Finolu Island. China is already creating similar infrastructure in Maldives. This entire island was leased by Maldives to China. China is building runways, port facilities and harbour facilities at Fedu Finolu Island. Quite similarly, at the Sifavaru Island, India will be building the Ekatha Harbour, which will be a docking and port facility for the Maldivian Coast Guard. Alright, so this has great strategic implications for the Indian Ocean. That is why the topic is important. Coming to the last article for today, on page number 12, the Government of India has gone on alert with regard to the spread of H5N1 avian influenza. The H5N1, which is a strain of bird flu, has been spreading within the avian population, within birds, and it potentially has pandemic potential in humans. This is one of the viruses which can make a jump, a zoonotic jump to humans. And with further mutation, it can become so deadly and dangerous, it could trigger another global pandemic like the COVID-19 pandemic. But H5N1 usually does not affect human beings. It's a substrain, a subvariant of avian influenza or bird flu. It's known to cause acute respiratory illness in birds, but there are few rare occasions where humans have been infected, especially those who work closely with birds, with poultry animals, especially with chickens or migratory birds, for example. Right? Those who cull these animals, those who touch the bird droppings in the excreta, those who clean those areas, they are at the risk of contracting H5N1, which could lead to very serious flu symptoms, including fever, sore throat, cough, and it could trigger acute respiratory syndrome, which could even turn out to be fatal. There have been few documented cases of human transmission of H5N1 in few Asian countries like Hong Kong, and in few other countries. WHO has recorded cases where H5N1 has jumped from birds to human beings. But this has happened only in very rare cases where the people were in close contact with these birds. They were involved in poultry industry, or they were culling the bird, they were touching the blood or the excreta of the blood of the bird. So that is when they were infected, thus marking them as rare infections. But the fear is, if it spreads widely within the bird population, it is possible to undergo a dangerous mutation where it could become transmissible to human beings on a larger scale. If it becomes more transmissible and if it has the ability to jump from human beings to human beings, then it could easily trigger a pandemic. Given its dangerous symptoms and its fatality rate, it can become very, very serious as a pandemic threat. So that is why India has gone on alert, because a lot of H5N1 cases are being reported in different parts of the country. The bird flu cases have gone up, so we are keeping a close check on poultry farms, on the bird habitats, especially where migratory birds come in. India keeps conducting regular checks and tests, and we even implement few SOPs to prevent close contact between humans and these birds. Right? So that is what you need to understand with regard to H5N1, which is very important for your prelims. So this completes my discussion of today's The Hindu newspaper. Please take up the mains practice questions. It's based on the topics we covered earlier. I expect you to write an answer and post your answers in the answer writing portal, for which link has been given in the description box below. So with this, let's wrap up the session for today. Do let me know how it went. I'll take a look at all your comments. Don't forget to head to our Telegram channel, because we have a quiz on these topics immediately as soon as the session ends. So just support us by pressing the like button, subscribe to our channel, share it with other aspirants, and do let me know how the session went. Thank you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.